Welcome back. You're watching TVW's live coverage of the first day of the 2024 legislative session. I'm here with the Washington State House Republican Leader Drew Stokesbary of Auburn. Representative Stokesbary, thank you very much for taking a little time on this big day to sit down with us. If you could just lay out your priorities for this session.
Yeah, Washington State has so much potential. And I'm privileged to lead the House Republican Caucus. We have 40 Republicans who represent all corners of the state. And the 40 of us, we wouldn't come down to Olympia for the next 60 days and give up time away from our friends and family and communities and jobs if we didn't think that Washington had a lot of potential. But in too many ways, things are going on the wrong track here in Washington. There is a growing catalog of crises. We have the fewest police officers per capita. We saw the highest increase of any state in the country in fentanyl deaths last year. We have 70% of our kids, of our K-12 students, failing reading standards, 50% failing math standards. We had between the highest and third highest gas prices of any state in the country last year. So, it's time for a change, Republicans think, and it's time to fix Washington. So our priorities are going to be geared at addressing all of the things that we think are going wrong. We have a bill, one of our members has a bill, Representative April Connors, to provide rebates to Washington drivers to offset the high price of gas. We have bills to provide recruitment and retention bonuses to law enforcement agencies to improve the law enforcement staffing ratios we have throughout our state. We have bills to make childcare more affordable, bills to help catch up on K-12 test scores by putting more paraeducators and teachers in the classroom. We have bills to try to bring down the cost of housing by building more housing. We have got an ambitious agenda to be sure, but just because we only have 60 days doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying to solve the problems facing the people of Washington.
Where do you see the most likely areas for compromise without major friction?
I have been pleased that as I've been touring around the state this fall, talking with different groups about what's coming up this session, as I have talked a lot about how Washington State is in desperate need of more police officers. And like I said, we have the fewest police officers per capita of any state in the country. I've been pleased that I've heard a lot of Democrats echo that same concern. So I don't know exactly what that solution will end up looking like. I know we have several bills that we have proposed. One would just give grant money directly to cities and counties to hire more officers. One would tie that to criminal defense funding for counties. Another would use a portion of the state sales tax and rebate that directly to cities and counties to help them fund extra law enforcement hires. So there's a couple ways you could solve the problem, but I've been pleasantly surprised that my friends across the aisle have seemed to, at least some of them, acknowledge that it is a problem and it's a problem worth solving. So I think that's one area. Another one is homelessness. It's been frustrating that we have reached such a crisis point. I think Republicans have been trying to point out for years and years that this is a growing public health concern. Of course, building housing and providing services to people who need them will take time. We can't just snap our fingers and have enough beds overnight as badly as we want to. But in the meantime, while we're in the process of building out those facilities, we need to make sure that we don't have these dangerous encampments near schools, parks, playgrounds, childcare centers. There needs to be some other place to go that isn't causing huge public health and public safety concerns. And so that's been something that Republicans have talked about for a while. And so I'm pleasantly surprised and pleased, though, that the governor has proposed some money in his budget proposal that would fund removal of these encampments. I think it's a little late. I wish it had happened earlier, but I'm glad it's happening at all. And so that'll be something that Republicans continue to push for, and at least from the governor's office, he seems to finally be taking seriously as well.
So there are a number of initiatives that are pre-qualified, perhaps appear to be heading towards the legislature, potentially the statewide ballot in the fall, just on a number of different topics. Big signature policy issues for, big points of discussion over the past several years. What's your perspective on those, and how do you think the legislature should respond?
Yeah, if you read our state constitution, the very first sentence that talks about the legislative power in Article 2 says that legislative power is inherent in the people, and the people have just as much power to enact legislation as the legislature does. That those provisions have been around for 100 years, and they've got a long, storied history here in Washington. And so whenever citizens get together and petition their government through the initiative process, I think that's a good thing, because it means that democracy is working. And even if I disagree with the topic, and there's been plenty of initiatives I've supported and plenty I've opposed, appreciate that people are taking the time out of their day to sign these petitions and push the legislature to take action. In this case, it's somewhat unprecedented. If all 6 of them qualify, it'll be the most initiatives to the legislature that have ever been submitted in 1 year. 1 year in 1970-something, 3 were submitted. Other than that, there's only ever been 0, 1, or 2 submitted. So to have 6 in a year, I think is really quite something. And even if they ultimately aren't enacted into law, I think the fact that over 400,000 people signed each and every one of these suggests that the people of Washington are hungry for change. And that's why I said a second ago that despite all the things the state has going for us, there's still too many areas where we're failing. And there is this growing catalog of crises. It's time for a change. It's time to fix Washington. And these 6 initiatives would take meaningful steps towards fixing a lot of the problems that we're seeing when it comes to things like affordability, public safety, and K-12 education.
If I could just sort of segue, there's a shortage of public defenders. It's been relatively well publicized, but it really appears to be having an impact on the ability for local county court systems to process cases and even, to move people through the system. What's your perspective on that? Should the legislature do more, and if so, what?
Yeah, I have for the last number of years, when I was the ranking Republican on the Appropriations Committee, been a proponent of sending more state resources to counties to do just that. And it's important for 2 reasons. One is it's a constitutional obligation that criminal defendants have the right to counsel. So we need to make sure that that's being provided and we're following the Constitution. The other is that the state has a much more robust revenue structure than counties do. Counties get most of their funding from sales tax and property taxes. Property taxes are capped in how much they can grow a year. I think that's a good protection for taxpayers. But the state doesn't have any of those restrictions. Our budget is exploding. This will be my 10th session that we start in a few hours, and the budget has over doubled in my 10 years here. So the state is flush with cash, and so I think the state should be stepping up and providing some extra assistance to counties to fund these indigent defense attorneys. I would point out, though, that the counties, it's a two-way street with these counties, and there's a lot of counties, my own county of King County included, that is making prosecuting and charging decisions that me and many of my constituents strongly disagree with. And while I fully acknowledge that the state has an obligation to do a better job providing funding for indigent defense, county prosecutors, especially in places like King County, have got to do a better job actually bringing cases against the bad guys. We set a record last year for violent crime. We are the #1 property crime state in the entire country. We are #2 for auto thefts. So by virtually any metric, Washington State is failing when it comes to public safety. And part of the reason is there is a culture of lawlessness in different parts of the state, and that is being aided and abetted by county prosecutors who aren't charging the criminals that need to be charged. So certainly we need to provide better funding, but the county prosecutors also need to do a better job charging the bad guys.
I don't know if our viewers can tell, but the din, the roar that's sort of building here, it signals that we're getting close to the big hour. So with just about a minute left, anything I didn't ask you about, or anything you think we'll look back on this session and remember?
Well, the one other thing I would point out is just that, the legislature is not God. We are not perfect. We don't get everything right. And, we need to have the humility to be able to admit that, and the humility to be able to say, we tried something and it didn't work, let's try a different approach. And I think too often the legislature is a little too stubborn and doesn't want to do that. But if we want to fix everything that's wrong with Washington, I think we need some of that humility to admit where we got it wrong. And we also should not have so much hubris to think that our ideas are the only ideas that work. We need to listen to folks on both sides of the aisle. We need to listen to our constituents. We need to listen to the people that are doing the work on the ground that we're trying to regulate or legislate around, and be a lot more collaborative and open-minded. And I don't think we've done a good job as a legislature with that over the past few years, and I hope that these next 60 days can set a new example going forward.
We will have to leave it there. Representative Stokesbary, thank you very much for your time, and this will conclude the live interview portion of TVW's 2024 opening day legislative session coverage, but the legislature will gavel in here at the top of the hour for the ceremonial start of the new term. I'm Mike McClanahan. Thanks for watching, and take care.